Hello friends, Praxeus, good morning to you. Happy Friday everyone. Hey SB4, what did confuse you earlier? Welcome, I'm Jochen, the Monospace mentor, and this is my office hour in which I answer your questions. All you have to do is to go to mspc.sh/officehour. This has changed and I need to fix the announcement. qa.monospacementor.com should work too, but let me quickly check that the announcements are proper. I did recently, I think this week, on Tuesday, finish my URL shortener, the self-hosted URL shortening service called Cut, and now I'm using that to publish my usual URLs. And mspc.sh/officehour is the one that gets you to the QA panel where you can post your questions instead of posting them in chat here, because first of all, it allows both people on Twitch and YouTube to post at the same place. Then it allows you to upvote questions that you like yourself. Third, it allows me to get a quick overview and not miss any. And fourth, it's easy for me to get them on screen so everyone who joins the stream mid-answer knows what I'm talking about. So there are a lot of advantages of using this QA platform, which is vvox.com, by the way. And I'm using it for my courses as well, so it does double or triple duty here. So you don't have to log in, you don't have to create a user account or anything. You can just go to mspc.sh/officehour and it'll allow you to enter your questions there, and I'll see them and I'll do my best to answer them. How is everyone? I hope you're doing great. Can you smell the weekend? I can, but I also can smell my coffee. Which at the moment is even more important than the upcoming weekend. Okay, I'm pretty good today. Not only did I finish my URL shortener on Tuesday, I learned a lot about using Podman to run container-based services in a very lightweight way. Yesterday we launched all our rebranded websites at my company. Everything is now in a fresh new design, which was about time after 10 years. So I'm very happy about that too. It has been months in the making, almost a year, and cost us a lot of effort and a lot of money. So I'm very happy to have that checked off. Today I fixed a few minor issues and I populated our new newsletter mailing list and connected the blog feed of the new website to our social media accounts, which are also new. So lots of new stuff and lots of work coming to an end here, and yeah, that makes me feel pretty good this week. I hope you are doing well as well. Praxeus says, I'm doing well, lots of running around today. Might have to drop before the end of the stream, but I'm looking into what projects I want to start with next week. That's awesome. It's always great to know what you're going to do with your time. And I might actually occupy your time a little bit if we are making progress with PubMox, our Proxmox cluster that will be available to TSR members. TSR, of course, being the server room, my community of practice, where you can become a member, support my work financially, and get a lot of community and learning opportunities in return. So that is something I can highly recommend. And you'll meet people like Praxeus there. And now I wanted to fix the URL. That URL, I think, comes from OBS here. Let me see. Q&A. Yep, that needs to be updated. So that's mspc.sh/officehour. And that's that. And that's where I'll be waiting for your questions. And until any questions come in, I'll simply sit here and have my coffee. That's the nice thing about Fridays, the nice thing about my office hours. It's just sitting here until someone wants to know something. Something that hopefully I do know and can tell you about it. I just noticed that my PyDP11 has come to a standstill there. What do I need to do? I really need to find out how to restart SimH services, because the PyDP11 back there, the blinking lights thingy, is a replica of a PDP-11 mini computer from the 70s, and it's running SimH, a simulator for historic operating systems and computing platforms. So it can actually run PyDP-11 simulated hardware, and on it I can run Research Unix version 7 for the PDP-11 in its original form, and other operating systems as well. So this is an amazing little machine for learning about historic operating system, especially about the early history of Unix. And I need to log in there. And I guess I'll simply reboot it, for lack of a better way to deal with this. And above the PyDP11, of course, there is another replica of a VT100 terminal, which fits the PyDP11 perfectly. I always wanted to have a VT100. First of all, it's really hard to even get one over here in Europe. They aren't as they weren't as common over here as they were in the US. And second of all, they are really hard. They are really expensive if you want a working one. And then third, they take a lot of space. So I got myself a model of a VT100, and just like the PyDP11, it has a Raspberry Pi in there that makes it a real terminal, makes it a real computer actually. And I'm pretty happy about that too. And the little keyboard even is working. We actually have a question about the PyDP11 on the board, but since 314 Dario asked in chat, and I don't want it to scroll off unanswered, I tackled that first. And again, if you just joined, please post your questions ideally to the Q&A form, so I can easily get them in an overview and on screen. But hey, it's not a problem if you post a question in chat as well. And Otic D joining us saying, have a nice stream. Thank you so much. Have a nice Friday yourself. So there's 314 Dario asking how to practice DevOps without coding skills. You don't actually need coding skills per se. You definitely should get them though, because even system administration alone, so the ops part of DevOps, does benefit greatly from having a certain level of coding skills, but DevOps per se doesn't require them if we take it by the letter. And the way I interpret DevOps is to have processes in place that create a seamless transition between development and operations. Maybe it's good to visualize that. So let me get my drawing tools here. So back in the day, we had developers and we had operations. Developers were and are responsible to do the software, and operations then were responsible for installing that software in production, which basically means putting them on servers and making them available to the people who are going to use it. So either if it's some in-house thing, they would run them on on-premise hardware and make sure it stays online. And of course, nowadays it's mostly web-based, so we are talking about servers that are connected to the internet. In the dark days, we had in between what we in the industry call the wall of confusion. And so that separated development from operations, and all that happened was that developers finished their software, whatever they did to do so, and threw it over the wall to operations. And operations then had to see what they could do about the software, if it even was compatible with the operating system of their servers and all these things. So in return, what came back mostly was what the fuck, and so that wasn't a very productive way to interact. And what DevOps does is it tries to eliminate this wall of confusion and create ways where dev and ops cooperate throughout the whole life cycle of the software towards the business goal this software was created in the first place. And that means that you don't have to be a coder to do DevOps practices. It helps because it helps you understand what the developers do, but it's mostly about cooperation, about, for example, as a developer, involving operations early to give input to how the software needs to be built, how to deal with dependencies, how to make the software even compatible with the production platform, things like that. And then, as operations people, integrating developers into the daily operation of the software, dealing with incidents, dealing with software failures and things like that. So the main thing about DevOps is cooperation and collaboration and building processes like, for example, CI/CD, that allow developers to get early input and early feedback about the quality of the software, and quick feedback cycles, so bugs can be fixed much quicker, and all these things. So think about DevOps more as a way of bridging development and operations, so that in the end the business success is more reliable. Now, there is another term in our industry that is similar to DevOps, and that's SRE, Site Reliability Engineering, and that much more requires coding skills, because that basically creates something where development and operations get combined, and where everything is automated from the start of the software development cycle to production operations, and that definitely is something where I don't think you can go without coding skills. Does that answer your question? And if not, please follow up, ideally over on our Q&A platform, mspc.sh/officehour, and if you have any follow-up questions, I'll try to tackle them. Now, we do have a question on the board now, so let's take a look. Specific question: what projects do you enjoy on your PyDP11? The actual question: if you wanted to learn historic computing, what sort of projects other than build it are there to explore? Well, as I said, the PyDP11 runs a simulator for an actual PDP-11 mini computer, and that enables it to run original software on there. And for the PyDP-11, there were multiple operating systems. Digital Equipment Corporation, who built the PDP-11, had their own operating systems, like, for example, RSX-11 or RSTS was another DEC operating system. And then others developed software and operating systems for the PDP-11 as well, including the folks at Bell Labs, where they invented Unix. And since a PDP-11 was the first computer, more or less, they had for this, the original Unix versions were developed for the PDP-11, which means that I can actually go into the PDP-11 and run Unix. An old Unix version, such as Unix version 6 or version 7. And I can go in there and see the many differences, of course, between the Unix versions of 1974 compared to Linux versions of 2025. And that is definitely something where you can expand your horizon and learn something from that. Of course, you can also run the other operating systems. For example, I, for a while, experimented with RSTS, and it's a completely different operating system with completely different ways to manage it and how to do file management. For example, RSTS doesn't really have directories. It doesn't have a hierarchical folder tree, but you could see early things like drive letters and stuff like that, which later, of course, found their way into Microsoft DOS and Windows. And so simply playing with these old operating systems and the old software that's available for them is definitely something that can teach you something. For example, I did install or did use Basic 2, the basic programming language, on RSTS, and found that it was very capable. It was developed up to the early 80s, I think, and it had a few properties that made it very much capable to write enterprise software with it. For example, you could create multiple modules, parts of your software, and call one module from the other. So even though the PDP-11 in the beginning just had 64 kilobytes of RAM, you could basically swap different modules of your software in and out, and that way you could build software that was much bigger than the 64K available on that machine. And that was quite impressive, to be honest. I think I would have loved if I mean, I started programming BASIC in 1984, so only shortly after the PDP-11 went out of fashion. And I think had I been a software developer in the 70s to early 80s, I would have loved working with this BASIC 2 interpreter, because it was very, very capable. So yeah, that's where I can learn a lot of stuff. I just see we are going into an ad break, so I'll see you in a minute or so. I'll quickly answer the question. Oh no, let's wait for the ad to be over, so no one misses my answers. We do have time, and I have coffee. Yeah. Office hours are pretty relaxed, something to cherish. For some of you, there's an ad running now. Practitioners asks, how's the coffee today? The tea I'm trying out today is a bit underwhelming. I guess, yeah, I'm happy with my coffee. Thank you for asking. I get my beans from a local roaster here in Ireland. I have a subscription that gets me a new bag of beans every 2 weeks, and I have my own grinder, so my coffee is always freshly ground and freshly prepared with an AeroPress. And since I have the same recipe all the time in terms of how much water and how long I steep things, and so I have a pretty consistent quality of coffee, and thanks to freshly ground and freshly roasted beans, it's really good. Also, the beans aren't roasted to death, just like the as opposed to the coffee that you usually buy in supermarkets. And so yeah, I'm very happy with my coffee, and I soften it because I'm a latte aficionado, so I drown the coffee in lots of oat milk, and that way I might not qualify as a real coffee enjoyer, but yeah, I like it as a beverage. And I guess with tea, you're just doing the right thing by trying a lot of them and then simply eliminating the ones that you don't like. And the good thing is, even if your tea is not great, usually throwing out a cup of it is really not a great loss. Usually, if you don't enjoy it, you have to down it by force, and if you don't enjoy the tea, you can always give the rest then away, or yeah, and maybe someone else will enjoy it a little bit more. Now, we should be back from the ad break, so let's tackle more questions here. Here's one that is easy to answer. When will you set up an Owncast where we don't need a Twitch account? I actually do have an Owncast. I just don't use it at the moment. I would have to set up another stream there, and I could do that because I thought that no one was interested in an Owncast instance, in visiting an Owncast instance, but apparently I was wrong. At least one person does appreciate being able to not go on Twitch. So I will consider reactivating that Owncast server as well. And again, that's another reason why I'm using Vvox as my Q&A platform, because that means I don't have to deal with 3 different chat streams when I'm streaming to Twitch, YouTube, and Owncast. I have one platform where questions come in and where I can get them on screen easily. Thanks for that question. Then there's a follow-up to the DevOps question. Yes, thank you. Can you please recommend some projects to make for my portfolio? There's so much choice. If you want to do some DevOpsy thing, yeah, maybe if you have something where you operate a website, say on your own server. Well, if you don't have a website that you run on your own server, that would be a project in itself. Start your own little blog or something and run it on a server that you maintain yourself. And if that's something that you already do because you are already on the system administration side of things and just don't want to code, then start automating the deployment of your website and your website content by using a CI system, for example, where you use Git to deploy your website software or even your content. That's what I'm doing with my personal blog. It's based on Jekyll, a static site generator. So all I need to do for my blog is to write Markdown files, and then I do a git push, and these files get pushed to GitLab CI, get processed there by a Jekyll instance, and then they get published either to Netlify or to GitLab pages in other instances where I maintain a static website. So that not only gives you better skills in terms of deployment, and you can add GitOps to your portfolio. It also makes things a lot easier because I need to save a file and then commit it in my repository and do a git push, and 3 minutes later it's online. So yeah, definitely something that I can recommend to do. Give me just a second because I just got a call and a message, and I want to check if it's something urgent. Doesn't look like it. Okay. Maybe. Let's just quickly answer on a live stream. Okay, and Darius says, thank you for your answers. Happy to answer. If you have more questions, feel free to post them. We still have time. Now there's another meta question. What's the tablet you use with that Stedler pen? The tablet that I'm using is a Books Go 10.3. And it uses capacitive pens. Of course, it comes with a pen, but I didn't like it as much as this actual Staedtler digital jumbo pen, because it looks so nice, like a pencil. And there's also a digital Lamy ballpoint pen that you can use with it. I didn't get that yet, but I might too, because it reminds me of my primary school days. So yeah, I really like the Books Go. It's a nice e-ink tablet. It has a very good e-reader and a very good note-taking application where you can also annotate PDF files. And the nice thing that I think makes the Books Go superior to its competition, like the Supernote or the Remarkable, is that it has Android as its operating system, which means that it also can install additional applications such as Obsidian or an email application or even a messaging application like Signal or something. Praxea says, there's nothing more German than being sentimental for a Lamy fountain pen that you hated using at the time. Yeah, definitely. And the same goes for the Staedtler pencil, of course. What's your thoughts about Nomad? And I got the Remarkable and that Lamy EMR. The Remarkable has Linux inside. It does have Linux inside. That might very well be the case, but does that mean that you can install additional software? I'm genuinely asking, because that, of course, is an interesting thing as well. I do remember that you can apparently SSH into the Remarkable, but I'm not sure what you then can do. So I'd be curious, and you can simply give us more details in chat if you like. But your main question was, what's your thoughts about Nomad? I find Nomad quite interesting because I'm very interested in lean ways to deploy infrastructure and applications. And even though Kubernetes is, of course, the default in our industry, it's very complex. And that complexity has its price. And that's exactly the reason why in the last 2 weeks I explored deploying simple web services, container-based services using Podman and Quadlet, which I found very successful. So the most lightweight way to deploy a container based application, if you don't need to scale it, if you don't need a lot of additional bells and whistles, is definitely Podman with Quadlet as the bridge to systemd. And Nomad is another of these leaner alternatives to deploy container-based workloads. And of course, it does have that scalability and additional bells and whistles built in, but it doesn't have a central API, or yeah, at least not in the way that it does not have a huge and complicated control plane such as Kubernetes. I think that puts it better. So getting stuff deployed with Nomad is very lightweight and straightforward, and that's what I like about it. I haven't used it in production yet. I might actually, because I think 2025 is definitely the year where we start introducing container-based workloads at my company's managed hosting platform. And so we probably will experiment a little bit with Nomad. I just am a little bit skeptical because it's HashiCorp, and with their rug pull basically last year in terms of Terraform and yeah, mostly Terraform, it made me lose a lot of confidence and trust in HashiCorp. So I'm not sure if I really want to bet my business on building on a HashiCorp product anymore. But that's something that needs to be explored. Oh, thanks for the link. I'll definitely check that out. Awesome, remarkable. Yeah, I look into that, even though I'm not in the market for a new tablet anytime soon. I need to make more use of the Books Go actually as it is. But I'll definitely take a curious look into what's possible with the remarkable platform. Keep the questions coming. We still have 15 minutes or so to go. This is a lot of fun. I think I'll open the window a little bit because my CO2 monitor is telling me that I'm starving my brain. Let's also turn on the fan. The weather is absolutely shit today outside. It's cold and raining. This morning my weather app said it's 4 degrees, feels like -5. Thankfully, I was allowed to sleep in for 1 or 2 more hours than usual, enjoying the warmth. So again, if you are just joining us here, this is my office hour, where I answer your questions if you post them to the QA session. And there are new questions. So let's take a look. Follow up to what I said earlier. You mentioned issue with HashiCorp. I think I missed in the news what you're referring to. Did you? You might already have forgotten that it happened, but it was last year that HashiCorp, I think shortly before they were acquired by IBM, changed the licensing of their software, where they basically put an end to companies using HashiCorp software to compete with HashiCorp itself. So HashiCorp, for example, offers a hosted Terraform state repository that you need to run Terraform in a serious way. And now companies can't offer their own Terraform-based state repository anymore because the license disallows that, the new license that they switched to. And they said, yeah, it's still open source because you still have access to the HashiCorp, to the Terraform source code and things like that. But of course, that gets us into the nuances of open source software, free software, and the freedoms that are connected with it. I won't get into that because you can read up on that anytime you want. So if you just search for HashiCorp and Terraform and maybe license, yeah, then you'll find all the coverage that happened back then. It was about a year ago, I think. And of course, that whole debacle led to Terraform being forked to a real open source project called OpenTofu, where they are basically offering Terraform, but based on the last open source version of Terraform, continuing basically that open sourced project under an open source, under a free software license. Here's another question. What other container orchestration would you consider other than Podman? LXC? I think this is the question that summons Balthasar, which is not a demon, it's just another member of the server room here. I'm curious if that actually happens. It would be hilarious if he just popped up at this minute. Oh dear. I can only pray that our managed hosting platform will be as reliable as you are, Cody. Thanks for this perfect timing. So let's get back to the question at hand. What other container orchestration would you consider other than Podman? LXC? I don't think LXC, because LXC is outdated by now. We were using LXC a lot for our hosting platform when we before we switched to using Hetzner Cloud instances, simply for the reason that Hetzner offered is offering an API that makes it much easier to spawn cloud instances at scale. And with LXC, it always was a lot of manual work, even though we try to automate it using our infrastructure as code platform, for which we are using Chef. No shade thrown at LXC, but there is, of course, a successor project to LXC, to which then there is another successor project. So LXD was developed as basically the next evolutionary step for LXC, and when Canonical, in that case, did some changes to how the project is developed. I don't think they changed the license, did they? But they basically ousted the Linux container team from developing LXD and basically owned LXD. Many of the previous developers of LXD, not many, but a few of them left Canonical and started doing their own thing. Stefan Graeber, for example, left Canonical, and shortly after that did another fork. I mean, forks are the tool of the people, of the open source people, and in that case the fork is called Incus. And Incus, I think, is definitely also an alternative to deploying containers. However, as DM Constantino, hi by the way, says, its purpose is different from Podman and Docker, because the containers that LXC, LXD, and Incus usually spawn are full Linux hosts. They are not just application images like the ones we are used to running in Docker or Podman, but they are basically full operating systems sans the kernel. DM Constantino says see them as light VMs. Yeah, that's putting it quite rightly. Basically, with LXC, LXD, Incus, you get Linux hosts that can run whatever Linux distribution, and the only thing they don't have is their own kernel, which means they don't require some kind of a hypervisor or hardware abstraction, things like that you would have with a full-fledged VM. If you don't need that and just say, okay, I want to run 3 or 4 Debian instances, or 2 Debian instances and 2 Arch instances on the same host, then LXD or yeah, I'll say Incus from here on out, because that's what I would recommend in this case, can provide you with. On top of that, since Incus has has also GUIs where you can easily operate it. It's a good thing that, as DM Constantino says as well, you can actually use the same management interface to also run VMs and even OCI containers, which are the application images that I was mentioning earlier. So there's a lot of flexibility in Incus, and it's definitely highly recommended. DM Constantino, thanks for the follow. I really appreciate it. And yes, I just saw that you mentioned also that Canonical changed the license for LXD to the AGPL. Yeah, and in the same turn, they also were starting to require contributor, what is it called? Basically, where you have to CLAs. Yes, I'm blanking on the. Thank you, Balthazar. Contributor licensing agreements, basically, where you hand over ownership over the changes that you make, over the code that you contribute to the project owner, which in this case is Canonical. Dear, I need more coffee. So basically, with that AGPL license and the CLAs in place, open source developers basically do volunteer work for Canonical, not for the open source community, but for Canonical. And so there were quite a lot of people that didn't agree with that. Oh, okay. I stand corrected. The Canonical CLA did not require that. And you just licensing, you give a license to them for your changes. Okay. How about further license changes? Can Canonical do a rug pull in the sense that they could say, yeah, LXD is now differently licensed and you can't compete with Canonical using LXD? Because these are the things that often are connected to these kinds of license changes and introductions of CLAs and stuff like that. So yeah, back to the question. The container orchestration that I would consider would be Incus. And then of course, yeah, I mean, Kubernetes, of course, it's the de facto standard. And if you need the firepower of a fully operational space station, then I guess Kubernetes is definitely the way to go. Bertha says, given that the lead dev of LXD is the one who made the fork to Incus, that's the direction I'm going. Yeah, makes perfect sense. It's really sensible. I do think that Canonical shot themselves into the foot with that swerve, because they lost quite a bit in terms of dev power. They caused themselves quite substantial brain drain, so I don't think it was wise in the long run. But that's becoming an everyday thing in the open source ecosystem, and we all need to learn how to deal with that. Perkins, why are you glad for these history lessons? Curious. There is another question on the board that's about a board. What's your keyboard? My keyboard of the day is a new Model F62. Let me try and show it to you. I need to be very careful because that thing is heavy. So that's the Model F62 with its nice buckling spring switches. Maybe let's see if the microphone picks them up. When the new Model F project became popular, I had to get this. It was pretty expensive, even especially since it needed to be shipped from the US, and then again caused additional customs fees and all kinds of stuff. I actually don't want to think about the price, but I worked with IBM terminals in early internships, even before I started studying computer science. And we are back to nostalgia, I guess. Hearing that sound just takes me back to my summer internships and stuff that actually led to me where I am today. Proxmox is because they're natively supported by Proxmox. Ah, yes. Proxmox does have LXC. Yep, you're right. It's basically the same thing. While Proxmox usually primarily uses VMs to deploy workloads, you can also use LXC containers, and that's where the lightweight VM term that DM Constantino used earlier comes in really handy, because they are exactly that. You still get a Linux host with its own IP address, with its own distribution. You can log into it like into any Linux host. It's just using less resources. It does use the Proxmox hosts kernel, which I'm not sure actually, now that I think of it, how this is. Well, you can't actually crash Proxmox from a container. You'd have to try really, really hard. So not having the hardware abstraction isn't probably a reliability issue. It's just that you can easily run some Linux installation without having to go into all the hypervisory stuff. Jim Constantino says, I also do it via LXD. I work on many projects and use LXC containers to separate out the dev environments. That's sensible, yep. Balthasar says, oh, you absolutely can crash a Proxmox host from an LXC container. Yeah, I do, sure. That's what I was thinking. In the moment I said, well, all these LXC containers share the kernel of the host machine, which is the Proxmox kernel, or the kernel of the Proxmox host machine. So that was when alarm bells went off in my head. It should be a concern, but it's not that. Yeah, you know what I mean. Especially if you are a rebel and run Docker in your LXC container. Yeah. You're generally safe if your LXC container isn't privileged. Yeah. I guess running privileged containers, privileged LXC containers is definitely a recipe for disaster, yeah. And as DM Constantino says, you can impose limits. You can shut down a few of the things, and you can impose resource limits, so you can't starve the host machine of RAM and things like that, which is something you definitely should do. Because other than VMs, where you have to define how much memory they get from the get-go, for LXC containers, they share a lot of the host system, and if you don't limit it, they share all the RAM of the host system, for example, and so they can actually starve the host machine if something goes wrong. Yeah, I mean, you always need to take precautions and know the risks that you're getting yourselves into, and then that will enable you to mitigate those risks as well. Dim Constantino also runs LXD on LXD or Kubernetes on LXD. Yeah, of course. I mean, these these ways of deployment are very inception-y, where you can run a VM inside a Docker container, and no, you can't run a VM inside a Docker container. You can start a VM from a Docker container. But yeah, you can nest them. Sure you can? Can you? Yeah. The only difference would be that the VM then is under the same constraints as the container, so it runs in the same namespace and things like that. Yeah, you're right. I've never thought about that, because that's really obscure and weird, but yeah. There's another question on the board. Where can we get one? And I think that question refers to where can you get a Model F keyboard? And let me see. The project is still active, and actually you can get more different models now than ever. But beware the price tag. Delayed Rain asks in chat, what is the most secure, most self-contained operating system level virtualization solution? I've never seen comparisons between different hypervisors in that regard. But all hypervisors that have been around for a while, I would expect them to have high levels of security and reliability. And so, for example, KVM is definitely something that I would be very confident to be a secure and self-contained virtualization solution. Oh, you meant containers. There are ways to I guess all those approaches that are out there, things like kata containers, for example, are based on running containers inside their own VMs. So again, it's the VM that provides the isolation. Yeah, I guess containers themselves are, yeah, that's the downside of containers being lightweight in the way they isolate from each other. And I guess the most important fact is that all containers share the same operating system kernel. And that is definitely a safety risk, a small one, albeit an existing one. And the only way to mitigate that risk is by running containers in separate VMs to really have isolation. That, of course, comes with a lot of resource overhead, but that's the price you'll have to pay for the isolation. Delayed Rain asks, as I understand it, they are just like change root commands. No, they are not. The change root part, in terms of the file system, is just one part of what containers do to isolate, to be separate from each other. The term that's central to this is called C groups, and there are different types of C groups that provide different types of isolation. So there is isolation on the file system level, where a single directory becomes the root file system of your container, just as change root does. But there are also isolation on the network level. So for example, an LXC container has its own ETH0 interface and things like that. It looks like it has its own network interface card. But of course, that's just mapped to a specific Ethernet interface on the host kernel. There's the same thing in terms of which processes a container can see, mostly its own processes only. That's what's called namespaces. So there are different isolation components that come together to build what we call containers. So they are basically an evolutionary step from change root to more isolation. But there are similarities. So if you understand what change root does, you can imagine what the other ways of separating do as well. And yes, the security question is hard to answer concisely.
It's a Unix system. I know this.
Thanks for following, Delayed Rain. Praxeus has a good tip, checking compliance guides and hardening guides, where you get an overview of what can be hardened and what are risks that you need to mitigate. Balthasar says the question is a bit broad and hard to answer because evaluating security really requires us to take requirements and constraints into account. Yeah, there needs to be a context because everyone has different demands on the level of safety they have. Balthasar goes on to say the hand-wavy answer is the most secure container / virtualization process is the one that you can do the least in while still achieving the goals of what you're trying to host, which is basically the minimalization approach to safety. Strip stuff off until you reach the limit of what still lets you achieve your goals. And if you have such a if you have such requirements, then of course it makes sense also to look into products and solutions that are already offered by companies that specialize in doing things like that. So if you have for example, need for PCI DSS compliance, HIPAA compliance, things like that, there is, of course, prior work that you can build upon. Another question on the board is, do you build sys images? And if you do, how do you do them? No, I don't. Actually, I would have to look up what sys images are. Maybe you can enlighten me. But I'll have a look at as well. Sys images, CIS, hardened images. Oh, okay. So that comes from the Center for Internet Security. And those are virtual machine images that are pre-hardened to their own benchmarks. Ah, yeah, okay. No, I'm not operating in any industry that requires this level of security, thankfully. I was, back in my corporate management days, I was responsible for the company's payment processing system, which meant that we had to deal with all the PCI DSS requirements, which always was a pain in the arse, and I'm happy to not have that anymore. All right, we are already well past the hour. I didn't notice. I mean, this is a lot of fun for me too. I hope it is fun for you too. Praxeus needs to drop. Yep, no worries. Have a great weekend. Thanks for stopping by. Talk soon. There is another question on the board. Were there any Linux distributions suitable for desktop use in the 2010s? If yes, which one have you tried and which one were the best back in the day? Which distro are you rocking right now? I use Arch, by the way. You did write all that just to end with that sentence, didn't you? Yes, there were. Well, it depends on your definition of suitable, of course. There were desktop Linux distributions back then. I did start using Linux a little bit earlier, actually. I started in 1993. Actually, I can't tell you much about the 2010s because that was my Mac era. I did use Linux early on when I started experimenting with Linux. Of course, I tried to also use it as a desktop operating system. And until the early 2000s, I tried that and wasn't quite happy, to be honest, because, of course, hardware support was not as great as it is today. Every time you got or you were about to buy a new graphics card to get better resolution, to when you upgraded from a 17-inch monitor to a 21-inch monitor, you wanted to have a graphics card to go with it, and you always had to take into account if there was Linux support for that graphics card, because even though there were new graphics cards coming out every month, of course, they only came with Windows drivers, and so Linux support was always lagging behind. And so you had to be very diligent in picking what products to buy. And even then, it was always a pain in the ass to get those drivers working. Maybe your Linux distribution didn't have a new enough kernel, even though there was support built into newer kernel versions. Maybe your distribution simply didn't use that new kernel version, and then you were SOL as well. So this was always a pain in the arse, and in the 2000s I had to switch my mindset to I have to do work during the day. I can't fiddle with drivers. I can't try and find the right incantations for my XF86 config file. And that's when I discovered discovered Apple hardware, basically. I bought a Mac Mini, when they still had the cookie box form factor, and I really enjoyed the polished UI and the coherent application UX, because everything followed Apple's interface guidelines and things like that. So I really enjoyed using Macs up until the 2020s, when I got frustrated with Apple, switched to Windows because I thought, yeah, well, Windows has the best hardware support, and I want to run games and at least casual, occasional games using an NVIDIA card. And so I thought, and Windows was improving its reputation. But then I switched, I introduced dual booting into Linux, and then I realized, oh wow, the Linux desktop has matured. And that's what got me where I am today, where all my machines are exclusively running Linux, regardless if they are servers or workstations or laptops. And the distribution that I'm rocking today is Bluefin by the Universal Blue project, which is basically an improvement on Fedora Silverblue. And so it's an atomic Linux distribution, and there's almost no live stream of mine where I don't sing the praises of Bluefin. I'm very happy with it, and I even install it on machines that I install for family, for example, because maintenance of these atomic Linux distributions is so easy and also so reliable that, yeah, that's my definite choice. And just last week and this week, I actually installed my first Fedora-based server, even though I had only been using Ubuntu for 2 decades on servers by now. I decided to take a look at how Fedora Workstation would work for deployment of Podman and Quadlet-based services. And it's been fun as well, which of course was easy because Bluefin is, as I said, based on Fedora too, so I'm very familiar with that on a daily basis. I did use an Arch-based distribution too when I got my latest PC, which I've been running for years now as well, because it's so overspec'd. I did install Manjaro, but eventually the bleeding edge approach led to problems, and again reminded me I need to be able to do my daily work. Losing time on fixing operating system issues is just unacceptable for me by now. I have so little time with all the responsibilities that I have that I can't deal with that. And so that ended with me installing Fedora Workstation, because it's also quite at the cutting edge, but not quite as much as the Arch-based distributions. And then I switched to Fedora Silverblue, and then I switched to Bluefin, which gets us to the present. That was a very long answer to a pretty short question. I apologize. There's another question. Hey man, any tips for a fresher front-end developer currently looking for internships? No, I'm not. We are in the hosting business exclusively, so we don't actually need front-end development at my business. But it's definitely a good thing to be looking in the community. And so I don't fault you for asking. All right. Last orders. I'll be switching off soon, and so if there's any more questions about software deployment, hosting platforms, or Linux, or DevOps, SRE, IT career questions, anything that crosses your mind where you're still looking for answers, post them to the board, and we'll do a last round of answers. Because, yeah, not only am I running out of time, I've also run out of coffee. So let's collect a few more questions. There is a question, is that a weekly meeting? Yes, it is. Usually I do these office hour live streams every Friday at 2 p.m. UTC. So next week there will probably be another office hour as well. And I just added an office hour channel to our Discord server. So if you're not going to be around next Friday, you can also post your questions to the office hour channel on the Monospace Mentor Discord, and I'll pick them up there. And then you can simply watch the VOD on Twitch or the recording on YouTube. And yeah, I'll make sure to cover all questions that get posted to the office hour channel as well, which reminds me that I should actually look into if there is any question that popped up there. No, there is not. The office hour channel is still empty. So yeah, feel free to go ahead and change that. Hop into Discord, ask questions in the office hour channel. I will then pick them up at the next office hour live stream. There's another IT career question that is very pertinent. Oh, I'm sorry. I just clicked the wrong button. Give me a second to fix that. Okay. Fixed. The question was, can one learn DevOps and get a job without any bootcamp or stuff just by him or herself? Yes, it's definitely more work, or it needs... Let me phrase that differently. If you want to get ready for a DevOpsy job without joining a bootcamp or things like that, then okay. Getting distracted here a little bit. It's possible to do that. However, then it's up to you to provide all the structure and guidance that the folks at the bootcamp would usually do, which means you need to find your own curriculum, you need to define your own projects, you need to push yourself to make progress and stuff like that. And that is just a little bit harder than having other people accompanying you or guiding you, which I will take as an opportunity to highlight that there is a community that does these things. The server room, my membership community, is exactly such a place where you can join and not only get in touch with other DevOps practitioners and exchange questions and answers and learn from each other, but also we do quite a few community events where we get together, say in monthly hangouts where we just have casual chats, but also things like deep dives where I present a topic in depth. It's basically like a conference presentation where we also do workshops. And with a gold membership, you will even be able to take part in all my in-person courses for free. So definitely, that's definitely an alternative to boot camps, and we'll be able to work out a curriculum or define projects for you as well, depending on your needs and what part of the industry you want to go into. So it's definitely possible, but it needs a little bit more initiative and a little bit more discipline than if you just join a guided program. But I'm confident that the server room will be able to fill that gap as well. Another question is, any tips on selling software to businesses? I'm afraid that's a very broad question that's really hard to answer on a stream like this because, well, the follow-up question would be what kind of software? The other question would be what kind of businesses? The other question would be what's your role in that? Are you going to develop that software or are you just going to sell it to businesses? So that's a very fundamental question where I think you need to provide a few more answers yourself first before you can get some kind of consultation from someone else. And even then, I have my doubts that people would give you solid advice free of charge. Tim Constantini, you wrote, that is an emergency. Oh, I think you were referring to the fact that I was running out of coffee. Yeah, it is an emergency and means that I'm going to wrap things up now. If you don't have any questions that pop up on the board right now, I will wrap things up. I will actually... Okay. I had to call for it, I guess. So there's another question. Do you play games? What hardware are you rocking right now in your main machine? I know, unrelated question, but why not? Yeah, why not? I do play casual games. I do play World of Warcraft. Less and less, to be honest, because the only thing I'm doing in World of Warcraft right now is doing raiding with my guild. I don't really play solo anymore, and since there hasn't been a new raid in weeks or months now, that has basically fell dormant. And the other games that I really enjoy playing right now are the truck simulators, American Truck Simulator and European Truck Simulator 2. I really enjoy relaxing behind a steering wheel for half an hour or so, and at the same time improve my skills in navigating a truck and a trailer. So I really enjoy doing that. I will actually probably play some more ATS after this stream once I've finished up all my Friday work. So that's what I'm playing right now, which means the games that I'm playing don't really put too hard requirements on my workstation, but my main machine is pretty okay in that regard too. It's a Ryzen 9 with 96 gigabytes of RAM and an NVIDIA RTX 3060. So more than capable to do both my daily work, including running VMs for testing and stuff like that, and covering my casual gaming as well. And I guess with that question, I will close this session. And let's take a look at if there is someone who we can raid. Why not join Owellian, who's doing hacking on Fedora infrastructure applications? They just started their own stream, so I guess we'll stop over by them.
It's a Unix system. I know this.
I'm going to start the raid and say hi from me over there. I'll be back next week with another live stream. Follow my stream, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and consider joining the server room if you'd like to support me and my work. And until I see you next week, take care.